A gilded brunch invitation, a practiced smirk, and 6 words, "You're not in the will." They expected tears. Instead, a stranger in charcoal gray placed a wax-sealed envelope in my hands while my parents watched. I broke the seal, and their dining room became my courtroom. If you've ever been deemed worthless by your own blood, pull up a chair. By the time the champagne flutes were empty, every seat at the table had a new owner. My name is Lauren Pierce, and I've spent 34 years learning that family isn't about blood, it's about who controls the bank accounts. The Maison Laurel sat like a jewel box on Harbor Heights waterfront, its windows catching the noon sun in sheets of gold. My mother had chosen it, naturally. Miriam Pierce never met a French restaurant she couldn't weaponize into a statement about taste and breeding. The linen napkins were heavier than my laptop, and the waiters moved like choreographed shadows between tables of old money pretending to enjoy $40 eggs Benedict. "We've made some adjustments to the estate planning," my father announced, slicing through his duck confit with surgical precision. Victor Pierce didn't believe in small talk, especially not when delivering verdicts. His gray eyes, the same ones I'd inherited, but learned to hide behind contacts, swept across the table like he was addressing a board meeting. "Your mother and I feel it's important to be transparent about our intentions." Transparent? I almost laughed. The man who'd built Northbridge Dynamics on handshake deals and NDAs wanted transparency. My younger brother Cole leaned back in his chair, already knowing what was coming. His MBA from Wharton caught the light from where he'd propped it mentally on the table, right next to his smug certainty. At 31, he still had that boyish face that photographs well at charity galas, the kind of face that made investors trust him with millions, despite his track record of burning through development budgets. The company, the West Park estate, the investment portfolios, they'll be structured under Cole's management. My mother continued, her voice smooth as the hollandaise sauce nobody was eating. "He understands the vision for Northbridge's future." The vision. Right. The vision that had the company hemorrhaging market share for 3 straight quarters. And for me, I kept my voice neutral, fingers steady on the stem of my water glass. Ice clinked against crystal, the only sound betraying movement. "A modest trust," Victor said, "enough to maintain your current lifestyle." Current lifestyle, as if they knew anything about my studio apartment in the city, my 12-hour days debugging code, my life beyond their curated family portraits. Cole's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close enough. "It's really what's best for everyone. Lauren, the company needs someone who understands its DNA. DNA. From the boy who couldn't code a landing page without 3 developers holding his hand." That's when the stranger appeared. She moved between tables with purpose, not like the waitstaff, but like someone who belonged wherever she stood. Charcoal suit, leather portfolio, the kind of presence that made my parents straighten in their chairs. She stopped at our table, her eyes finding mine with laser precision. "Ms. Pierce." She didn't wait for confirmation. "From Rutherford and Vale, I was instructed to deliver this at the moment your parents discussed their estate planning." The envelope she placed before me was heavy, cream-colored, sealed with burgundy wax. An old-fashioned touch in a digital world. My parents exchanged glances, the quick, sharp communication of people who didn't like surprises in public spaces. What is this?" Miriam's voice had edges now, the smooth finish cracking. "I'm simply the messenger," the woman replied, already stepping back. The instructions were quite specific. "Good afternoon." She left me holding the envelope while my family watched. Their brunch suddenly forgotten. The wax seal bore an impression I recognized a small riverboat, the mark my grandmother Evelyn had used on her personal correspondence. She'd been dead 6 months, but apparently, she wasn't finished. Well, Victor's impatience filled the space between us. I ran my finger along the seal's edge, feeling the weight of 3 pairs of eyes on me. Around us, Harbor Heights elite continued their champagne brunches, oblivious to the tectonic plates shifting at table 12. "They say the dead can't speak," I said, breaking the seal with one clean motion. But they forget that lawyers are really just professional mediums with better billing rates. The wax cracked like a gunshot in the refined quiet of Maison Laurel. Inside was a single sheet of paper, dense with legal text, and 3 words at the top that changed everything: Contingency Activation Protocol. I touched the paper's edge, my voice steady as I looked up at my parents' suddenly pale faces. "You forgot something about me," I said. "I work in evidence, not emotions. And grandmother, it seems, worked in insurance." The champagne in Cole's glass had gone flat. My mother's hand trembled as she reached for her pearls, the ones grandmother had given her, the ones that were supposed to stay in the family. Everything was about to change owners. The Pierce family home in West Park had 17 rooms, but I could tell you exactly which one you'd find me in on any given day of my childhood: the breakfast nook, doing homework while Cole's trophies gleamed from the formal dining room's built-in displays. Soccer at 8, debate team at 12, valedictorian at 18. My report cards lived in a drawer. His were framed. "Cole's closing another deal," my father would announce at dinner, though Cole was 16 and the deal was convincing our parents to buy him a car. Natural leadership. Meanwhile, I'd spent 3 days teaching myself Python from library books because the computer science teacher said girls usually struggled with logic structures. My parents never asked what I was typing in my room until 2:30 a.m. The sound didn't photograph well at charity galas. The comparisons started young and never stopped. Cole's A+ in economics became proof of his Pierce business instinct. My A in the same class, 2 years later, meant I lacked focus. They never mentioned I'd taken it while working 20 hours a week at a campus help desk, debugging code for students who'd grown up with tutors instead of public libraries. "You're smart enough," my mother once said, adjusting my dress before a donor dinner. "But Cole has that spark. You understand, don't you? Some children are meant to lead, others are meant to support." I was 12. I understood perfectly. The only person who saw it differently was my grandmother, Evelyn Rivers. While my parents paraded Cole at Northbridge Dynamics annual presentations, "The future of the company," they'd say. While he stumbled through PowerPoints I'd helped him build, grandmother would pull me aside. "Watch the room," she'd tell me during those endless corporate gatherings. "Count the exits, note who stands where. Power isn't in the spotlight. Lauren, it's in seeing what others miss." She taught me her tricks over secret lunches when my parents thought I was at study groups. How to memorize a space in 3 seconds windows first, then doors, then the flow of light. How to read a contract like a map of intentions. How to listen to what wasn't being said. "Your mother married into money," she told me once, her eyes sharp as winter. "But Rivers women built it. We just learned not to put our names on the buildings." When I struggled in school, later diagnosed as mild attention deficit, though my parents preferred unfocused, grandmother was the one who helped me develop systems. Color-coded notes, physical movement while memorizing, breaking large tasks into tiny, conquerable pieces. "Your brain works differently," she said. "That's not a flaw. That's an angle of attack others won't see coming." My parents saw it differently. The tutors they hired for Cole became investments in excellence. The help I needed was concerning. When I finally scraped into State University while Cole waltzed into Wharton, the family Christmas card that year featured only 3 people. I was taking the photograph. The night before I left for college, I found grandmother in my father's study, staring at Northbridge's incorporation documents. "He's going to give it all to Cole," she said. Not a question. "It was always going to be Cole," I replied. She turned to me, and for the first time, I saw anger in her carefully composed face. "Your father sees what he wants to see, a son who looks like success. But looking successful and being successful are different games entirely." She pulled out a business card, worn at the edges, Dr. Naomi Alder, Cognitive UX Research, University of Washington. "When you're ready to stop playing their game," she said, "call her. Rivers women don't beg for seats at tables. We build our own damn furniture." 3 months later, Grandmother had her first stroke. She lived another decade, watching from her wheelchair as my parents systematically erased me from the family narrative. Cole's graduation got a party for 300. Mine got a card. Cole's first job at Northbridge got a press release. My first promotion went unmentioned. But grandmother watched everything. And apparently, she took notes. The last time I saw her alive, she could barely speak. But she managed 5 words, pressing a key into my palm. Check the lighthouse, Rivers Trust. I thought it was the medication talking. The lighthouse had been sold years ago. I was wrong about a lot of things. But mostly, I was wrong about grandmother. She wasn't just watching, she was planning. And Rivers women, as she'd always said, plan for contingencies. The key was still in my apartment, tucked in a drawer with other things I couldn't throw away but didn't know how to use. Now, sitting at this pristine brunch table with my family's world order crumbling in my hands, I finally understood what she'd been building all those years. Not an inheritance, a weapon, and she'd made sure I was the only one who knew how to fire it. The night I left home, I had $300, a decade-old laptop, and a list of community colleges that offered night classes. My parents hadn't explicitly kicked me out that would look bad at the country club. They simply made it clear that family resources were better allocated elsewhere. I took classes in strips and fragments, database management at 7 p.m., user interface design at 9, coffee at midnight, coding until 4 a.m., then a shower at the gym before my 6 a.m. shift at a call center. The degree took 6 years instead of 4, but I built it like scar tissue layer by layer, tougher each time. The job at Arkwell Labs wasn't advertised. I found it buried in a GitHub comment thread, a throwaway line about needing someone who understood cognitive load in hostile interfaces. I sent them my portfolio at 3:12 a.m. on a Tuesday, high on caffeine and spite. They called back in 4 hours. Arkwell specialized in adaptive technology software that learned how users' brains worked and adjusted accordingly. My manager, Steve Ryken, was a former Microsoft burnout who believed the future of tech wasn't making users adapt to systems, but making systems adapt to users. "Your code is ugly," he said during my interview, scrolling through my submissions. "But it works for people whose brains don't follow rules. That's worth more than elegant algorithms that only work for machines." I started as a junior developer, but within 6 months, I was leading user research. Turns out, understanding how my own brain had to fight systems made me exceptional at designing for others who struggled the same way. Every accommodation I'd built for myself became a feature for someone else. The Aster Reader project started as a side experiment. I was watching a colleague struggle through documentation, his dyslexia turning technical specs into hieroglyphics, when I remembered grandmother's words about angles of attack. What if reading assistance wasn't about changing the user, but changing how text presented itself? Nights blurred together. My apartment became a lab sticky notes covering walls, test users coming through at all hours, pizza boxes stacked like architectural models. I built 17 prototypes before finding the right balance software that could detect reading patterns, identify struggle points, and adjust in real time. Not just font changes or color overlays, but fundamental restructuring of how information flowed. Dr. Naomi Alder became my anchor. Grandmother's contact had become a mentor, then a conspirator. Her cognitive research lab at UW gave my project academic credibility. More importantly, she taught me to document everything. "Patents are power," she said, watching me demonstrate version 23. "But only if you file them before anyone knows what you have." We ran trials with 300 users, corporate employees who'd hidden their learning differences for decades, programmers who read code brilliantly but stumbled through emails, executives who recorded everything because written words swam on the page. The results were staggering. 37% productivity increase, 52% reduction in reading errors, 91% user satisfaction. "You need to incorporate," Naomi insisted. "Now, before Arkwell or anyone else realizes what you've built." Asterisk Systems LLC was born at the Harbor Heights County Clerk's office on a Thursday afternoon. I used grandmother's maiden name L. Rivers on all the documentation. A ghost company for a ghost daughter. The first contract came through Naomi's Connections, a Fortune 500 company desperate to improve their internal documentation systems. They didn't care who L. Rivers was, only that the technology worked. 3 months later, they renewed for triple the amount. I kept my day job at Arkwell, letting everyone think I was just another developer grinding through sprints. Meanwhile, Asterisk Systems was quietly closing deals with Microsoft, Adobe, and 3 government agencies. The bank account I'd opened with $300 now held numbers that would make my father's jaw drop. But I stayed invisible. No LinkedIn updates, no tech conference presentations, no TechCrunch profiles. Every contract included ironclad NDAs. Every payment went through shell companies. I was building an empire in the shadows, one accessibility feature at a time. "Why hide?" Steve asked once, after a few drinks at a team celebration. "Your work is brilliant. You could be running this place." "Some people need spotlights," I told him. "Others work better in the dark." He thought I was being modest. I was being strategic. Let Cole have his press releases about Northbridge's revolutionary supply chain optimizations that were really just repackaged consultant recommendations. Let my parents trumpet his vision at charity galas. I was too busy building actual solutions for actual people and filing patents. So many patents. The email that changed everything came at 2:47 a.m. on a Wednesday. Northbridge Dynamics is seeking adaptive interface solutions for our logistics platform. Please submit proposals to procurement. They were shopping for exactly what I'd built. My father's company, hemorrhaging clients because their interfaces were dinosaurs, was unknowingly asking their discarded daughter to save them. I submitted the proposal as L. Rivers, Asterisk Systems, and I made sure to price it at exactly triple their budget. They'd pay it. They had no choice. I was the only one who had what they needed. The irony was delicious, but not as delicious as what came next. Northbridge Dynamics was bleeding money like a severed artery, and I had the receipts to prove it. The quarterly reports told the story my father would never admit: 3 years of declining revenue, clients jumping ship to competitors, and a technology stack so outdated that new hires needed training on systems older than they were. But the real treasure was buried in their SEC filings: a bridge loan from Granite Cove Capital, taken out 18 months ago when cash flow hit critical. Bridge loans are meant to be temporary. This one had become a noose. I found the loan documents through perfectly legal channels. Granite Cove had to file notice of significant corporate lending, and Northbridge, as a supplier to public companies, had disclosure requirements. The terms were brutal: 14% interest and a covenant requiring EBITDA to stay above $12 million quarterly. Fall below that, and Granite Cove could convert their debt to preferred equity, essentially stealing the company for the price of a bad loan. Last quarter, Northbridge hit $11.7 million. They were $300,000 away from losing everything. That's when I made my move. Granite Cove was desperate to offload the risk. The loan officer, Marcus Delacroix, practically sobbed with relief when my lawyer called. L. Rivers was interested in purchasing distressed debt, specifically loans with conversion options. Would Granite consider selling Northbridge's note $22 million? Marcus offered immediately. The loan face value was $28 million. He was so eager to dump it. He was taking a $6 million loss. $18 million, I countered through my attorney. Cash, close in 72 hours. Deal. I used Harborview Holdings, an SPV I'd created specifically for this purpose. The paper trail led through 3 law firms and 2 states before disappearing into a trust registered in Delaware. My father could dig for years and never find me at the end of it, but the loan was just one piece of the puzzle. The real ammunition had been sitting in a lighthouse on the coast, waiting for 6 months. Grandmother's Rivers Trust wasn't just money. It was 18% of Northbridge Dynamics' founding shares, purchased when my father was still running the company out of a garage. She'd been his first investor, back when he was just Victor Pierce with a good idea and empty pockets. He'd paid her back in cash years ago, but she'd never sold the equity. Why keep it, I'd asked her once. Insurance, she'd said. Men forget who helped them rise. Paper doesn't. The trust documents were hidden in the lighthouse she'd supposedly sold, except she hadn't sold it. She'd transferred it to a preservation society she controlled, with a storage room only accessible by the key she'd given me. Inside, along with the share certificates, was a letter in her shaking handwriting. Lauren, your father will try to erase you from the family legacy. These shares are yours when he does. But only if he does it for the reason we both know he will, because you don't fit his image. Make him say it. Documents are powerful, but witnessed words are devastating. The third piece of leverage came from Cole himself, delivered by a disgruntled Northbridge developer named Jamie Torrent. She'd emailed L. Rivers directly through Asterix's website at 1:17 a.m., drunk and furious. I know you're working on adaptive interfaces, she wrote. I built something similar at Northbridge last year, won an internal innovation award. Guess whose name was on the patent filing, hint not mine. The attachment was damning emails showing Cole taking credit for 3 different employee innovations, patent filings with his name where developers should be, and a particularly stupid message where he bragged to Victor about his breakthrough while the actual inventor was CC'd. Patent fraud. Securities fraud if you counted lying to investors. Enough to trigger a lawsuit that would make Northbridge untouchable to any buyer except one holding their debt. I had them in a 3-way vice: their loan, their equity structure, and their legal exposure. Any one piece could wound them. Together, they were a corporate death sentence. I met with my M&A lawyer, Sandra Kellerman, in her office overlooking the harbor. She read through everything twice, then leaned back in her leather chair. This is surgical, she said. Whoever L. Rivers is, she's either a genius or has a very personal grudge. Can't she be both? I asked. Sandra smiled. The best ones usually are. What's the end game? Complete restructuring, new board, new leadership. The family keeps minority stakes and their dignity, or they lose everything and everybody knows why. And if they refuse, I thought of every birthday they'd forgotten, every achievement they'd ignored, every time they'd introduced Cole as their pride and joy while I stood invisible beside him. Then I exercised the conversion option, call an emergency shareholder meeting with my 18% Rivers Trust shares plus the preferred equity, and vote them out before their coffee gets cold. Sandra whistled low. Remind me never to piss off L. Rivers. I pulled out the newest document, a term sheet for voluntary restructuring. It was generous, considering I could take everything. They'd keep their positions as non-voting board members. Cole could run an innovation lab with actual oversight. The Pierce name would stay on the building, but Asterix Systems would run the show, and L. Rivers would own the keys. File it all, I told Sandra. Everything ready to execute the moment I give the signal. She nodded, already pulling up the necessary forms. Why, when I thought of the wax-sealed envelope waiting in my apartment, the one from Rutherford and Vale with instructions to open only when my parents announced their estate plans. Soon, I said, very soon. The orchestration began at 5:43 a.m., 3 days before the brunch. I sat in my apartment with 17 browser tabs open, 4 phones charging, and a whiteboard covered in timestamps. Every domino had to fall in perfect sequence. First call, Sandra Kellerman. Notice of default drafted and ready. The moment they breach the covenant terms publicly, we can file. Second, Marcus Reed, my contact at TechCrunch. If I had a story about a major logistics company undergoing emergency restructuring, would you want it exclusively? His voice sharpened like a blade. If you can publish within an hour of my signal, I'll clear my Sunday. Third, the restaurant. Maison Laurel's manager, Philippe Dubois, owed me a favor after I'd helped his daughter get accommodations for her learning disability at Princeton. I need a table on Sunday, table 12, specifically, and I need you to personally be within earshot at 12:15. Consider it done. The legal pieces required more finesse. The Rivers Trust activation had specific triggers. I had to be explicitly excluded from inheritance for image or social standing reasons. The words mattered. My grandmother had been precise about that. I hired a court reporter, telling her it was for a business negotiation that might require documentation. Discreet recording, I specified, time-stamped, admissible in court. She recommended a colleague who specialized in hostile corporate situations. Perfect. The Harborview Holdings papers were already filed, the conversion option loaded like a bullet in a chamber. $28 million in debt could become 51% equity with one signature. But I wanted them to choose their own destruction. The voluntary restructuring would let them save face. The hostile takeover would burn it all down. Dr. Naomi Alder helped with the psychological preparation. Your family will react predictably, she said, reviewing their behavioral patterns I'd documented over years. Your father attacks when cornered. Your mother deflects through social positioning. Cole panics and looks to Victor for salvation. And me. You remain calm. Every emotion they don't see is a weapon they can't counter. I scheduled the email bombs for 12:30 p.m. Sunday notices to 3 major clients about Asterix Systems' new partnership opportunities, carefully worded to imply massive changes at Northbridge without saying it directly. If my parents didn't accept the restructuring, those clients would start asking questions by 1 p.m. The coup de grace was Cole's employee, Jamie Torrent. I'd convinced her to file a formal complaint with the Department of Labor, dated but not submitted. If Cole tried to claim credit for one more innovation, she'd pull the trigger. The filing was already in her lawyer's desk drawer, waiting. Saturday night. I couldn't sleep. I stood at my window, looking out at Harbor Heights' glittering lights, each one representing a family with its own secrets, its own careful facades. Tomorrow, mine would shatter. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Your grandmother would be proud. R&V, Rutherford and Vale, her law firm, still watching, still executing her wishes from beyond the grave. I pulled out the sealed envelope they'd delivered weeks ago, the one meant for tomorrow. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The paper was a notarized statement from grandmother, dated a week before her death. I leave the Rivers Trust shares to my granddaughter Lauren Pierce, to be transferred only upon proof that her parents have excluded her from their estate for reasons of family image rather than merit. This proof must be witnessed and documented. Upon transfer, she gains full voting rights plus proxy authority for all family-held shares for 24 months. The photograph was of grandmother and me at the lighthouse, the day she taught me to read legal documents. I was 12, squinting at the papers with a magnifying glass. She was smiling, her hand on my shoulder. On the back, in her handwriting, Rivers women don't break, we rise. Sunday morning arrived gray and damp, Seattle weather creeping down the coast. I dressed carefully, my grandmother's pearl earrings, a navy dress that cost more than my first car, shoes that clicked authority with every step. Look successful, be successful. Today, I'd be both. The Uber driver tried to make conversation. I gave him 5 stars and silence. At 11:58 a.m., I stood outside Maison Laurel, watching my family through the window. They were already seated, Victor checking his watch, Miriam adjusting her napkin, Cole scrolling through his phone. They looked like a portrait of success, the kind that hung in Northbridge's lobby. The court reporter was at the bar, equipment hidden in her briefcase. Philippe stood near the kitchen door, ready to witness. My phone showed 3 green lights, all recordings synced and running. At noon exactly. I walked in. Lauren. My mother's surprise was perfectly calibrated. We were wondering if you'd make it. I sat down, placed my phone face up on the table where the camera could catch everything, and smiled the smile grandmother taught me, the one that showed teeth but not weakness. Wouldn't miss it, I said. After all, we're discussing family legacy. The waiter approached with champagne. I covered my glass. I'll need to stay sharp, I said, watching my father's eyes narrow. Important documents require clear heads. He had no idea how important, but in exactly 15 minutes, when that envelope arrived. He'd learned that some daughters don't need inheritance. They take it. The envelope's wax cracked between my fingers like breaking bone. Around us, the restaurant's ambient noise seemed to fade, leaving only the sound of paper unfolding and my father's increasingly rapid breathing. Contingency activation protocol. I read aloud, letting each word fall like a stone into water. Pursuant to the Rivers Trust established April 15th, 1991. My mother's champagne glass stopped halfway to her lips. Rivers Trust. Grandmother's original investment in Northbridge, I continued, scanning the dense legal text for the witness's benefit. 18% founding equity, never diluted, never sold. Held in trust pending specific conditions. Victor's face had gone from confused to pale. He understood the math. 18% of founding shares meant 18% of everything, regardless of subsequent investment rounds. With modern valuations, that was worth approximately $42 million. Condition 1. I read, my voice steady as a newscast. The beneficiary, Lauren Pierce, must demonstrate independent financial success. Validated via Asterisk Systems LLC. Annual revenue exceeding $12 million. Cole's phone clattered against his plate. Asterisk Systems. That's the company we're negotiating with. Condition 2. The beneficiary must be explicitly excluded from the Pierce family estate for reasons relating to, quote, social standing, family image, or reputational concerns, unquote. I looked up, meeting my father's eyes. You just said I wasn't suitable for the family brand, in front of witnesses. Philippe had moved closer, no longer pretending to supervise waitstaff. The court reporter at the bar had shifted to capture our table in her peripheral vision. This is ridiculous, Miriam started, but I pulled out the second document. Notice of covenant breach, I said, placing it in front of Victor. Northbridge Dynamics, pursuant to your bridge loan with Granite Cove Capital, formerly with Granite Cove. The debt was purchased by Harborview Holdings last Tuesday. Purchased by... Victor grabbed the paper, his eyes racing through the text. Your last quarterly EBITDA $11.7 million. Required threshold $12 million. You're in default, Mr. Pierce. And as the new creditor, Harborview Holdings is exercising its conversion option. I produced the next document from my bag, each one landing with surgical precision. Option A, I said, placing the restructuring proposal before him. Voluntary reorganization. Asterisk Systems assumes operational control of product development and customer interface. You retain 30% equity and advisory roles. Cole transitions to technical development under professional supervision. The Pierce name stays on the building, and no one needs to know why the leadership changed. Victor's hands shook as he read. The terms were generous more than generous, considering I could take everything. Option B. The final document landed like a guillotine. Harborview exercises immediate conversion. Combined with the 18% Rivers Trust shares, I now control. Thank you for that public statement about family image. By the way, I call an emergency shareholder meeting. The vote happens before markets open tomorrow. By lunch, you're minority shareholders in what used to be your company. You can't, Cole started. Actually, I can. I pulled up Jamie Torrant's complaint on my phone, turning the screen toward him. Patent fraud. Cole. Really, Jamie has documentation of 3 separate instances where you claimed credit for employee innovations. That's securities fraud if you told investors these were your developments, which you did at the Q3 presentation. Cole's face went from red to white in seconds. If we refuse, Victor's voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. Then at 12:31, 3 emails go out. TechCrunch gets the exclusive about Northbridge's emergency restructuring. Your 3 biggest clients get notices about partnership transitions that will trigger immediate contract reviews. And Jamie files her complaint with the Department of Labor, CCing the SEC. I leaned back, letting the silence stretch. Oh, and the IRS might be interested in some creative accounting from fiscal 2022. Did you really think no one would notice you writing off Cole's MBA as a business expense? Miriam's pearls, grandmother's pearls clicked as her hand trembled against them. You planned this for 3 years, I confirmed. Every patent filed, every client signed, every dollar earned, all leading to this moment. You gave me the perfect trigger when you said I didn't fit the family image. Grandmother knew you would. She knew exactly what you'd say when you thought you'd won. I gestured to the documents spread across the white tablecloth like tarot cards revealing their future. So choose. Sign the restructuring and keep your dignity, or refuse and lose everything by 1 p.m. Victor looked at the papers, then at me. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. Not disappointment, not dismissal, actual fear. How was all he managed. You taught me that Pierces never show weakness, I said. You just forgot to teach me that Rivers women never forgive. Grandmother remembered. Though, she remembered everything. The restaurant had gone quiet around us. Other diners sensed the blood in the water, even if they couldn't see the sharks. Philippe stood 10 feet away, witnessing everything. The court reporter had given up pretending, her equipment now openly recording. The time is 12:23 p.m., I announced for the legal record. You have 7 minutes to decide before the emails auto-send. I pulled out my phone, showing them the scheduled messages, each one a corporate death sentence waiting to deploy. Cole found his voice. Lauren, we're family. No, I cut him off. You're the family that didn't want me. I'm the consequence you didn't see coming. 5 minutes. 4. 3. Victor's pen scratched across paper like fingernails on a coffin. Victor's signature looked like a seizure on paper, jagged, reluctant, but legally binding. The pen dropped from his fingers as if it burned. Witnessed and noted, Philippe announced from his position, his French accent lending gravity to the moment. The court reporter nodded, her equipment capturing every detail. Miriam hadn't moved, her hand still frozen on those pearls. Then, quietly, she spoke the words that sealed everything. We only wanted what was best for the family image. Perfect, I said, pulling out my phone. That's the exact phrase grandmother's trust specified. Thank you for the legal confirmation. Sandra Kellerman's number was already dialed. Sandy. Yes, she just said it. Word for word. Family image. I paused, listening. Confirmed. Execute the Rivers Trust transfer immediately. My laptop was already open, showing the Northbridge Dynamics shareholder registry updating in real time. The 18% shifted from Rivers Trust dormant to Lauren Pierce, active voting rights. Congratulations, I told my parents. You just made me your second largest shareholder. Cole slammed his hand on the table, rattling the china. This is extortion. This is business, I corrected. Something you'd know if you'd ever actually earned anything instead of stealing it from your employees. I pulled up the emergency board meeting notice on my laptop, filling in the details as they watched. Emergency shareholder meeting, scheduled for tomorrow, 8 a.m. First item, CEO transition. Second item, operational restructuring. Third item, investigation into patent filing irregularities. You can't call a meeting that fast, Victor protested. Actually, with 18% ownership plus creditor rights under default conditions, I can call one with 12 hours notice. Corporate bylaws, Section 7.3, you wrote them yourself. My fingers flew across the keyboard, copying Legala and Bordeaux and Investor. The send button hovered under my cursor like a loaded trigger. Unless, I said, pausing, you'd prefer to handle this right now. Save everyone the embarrassment of an emergency meeting. Victor's jaw clenched. What do you want? What I've always wanted. Recognition. I pulled out the final document, a press release, already drafted. You're going to read this, here, now, out loud, so everyone can hear it. He took the paper with shaking hands, scanning the text. His face went from pale to ashen. This says I'm stepping down as CEO. Keep reading. Effective immediately. Operational control of Northbridge Dynamics transfers to Asteric Systems and its founder, L. Rivers. whose identity is revealed today as Lauren Pierce. He looked up. You want me to publicly admit that your daughter saved your company? Yes. That the child you deemed unworthy of inheritance is the only reason Northbridge won't be in bankruptcy by Monday. Absolutely. The media will crucify us, Miriam whispered. No. They'll praise you for recognizing talent and making the tough decision to put company welfare above family pride. The alternative is they report on federal fraud investigations and emergency liquidation. I turned my laptop screen toward them, showing the TechCrunch draft Marcus had ready. The headline read, Breaking Northbridge Dynamics Undergoes Hostile Takeover Amid Fraud Allegations. Or, I switched tabs. We go with this version. Northbridge Dynamics announces revolutionary restructuring. Founder's daughter emerges as tech innovation leader. You've thought of everything, Victor said, something almost like respect creeping into his voice. Rivers women always do. I checked my phone. 12:28. Decide. Victor stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. The restaurant fell completely silent. Even the kitchen noise seemed to pause. He cleared his throat, the sound carrying across the room. Attention, everyone. His voice cracked, then steadied. I have an announcement regarding Northbridge Dynamics. Phones appeared at every table, raised to record. Harbor Heights loved nothing more than witnessing the mighty fall. After careful consideration and recognizing the evolution of our industry, I am stepping down as CEO effective immediately. He glanced at the paper, then at me. Leadership of our restructuring initiative will be assumed by Asteric Systems, whose founder, he paused, and I saw the exact moment he realized he'd lost everything, whose founder, L. Rivers, is revealed today to be my daughter, Lauren Pierce. Her innovations in adaptive interface technology will be integral to Northbridge's future. She has proven capabilities that I failed to recognize and nurture properly. Someone gasped. Camera shutters clicked. The court reporter typed furiously. Furthermore, Victor continued, each word seemingly pulled from his throat. The Pierce family recognizes Lauren's rightful position as primary stakeholder and strategic director. I was wrong to overlook her contributions. He sat down heavily, aging 10 years in 10 seconds. Cole stared at me, then at his father, then back at me. You planned for him to say that. You knew he'd have to. I knew that public acknowledgement was worth more than private revenge. I said, Grandmother taught me that power isn't just winning, it's making sure everyone knows you won. I closed my laptop, began gathering the signed documents. The transition team from Asteric will arrive at Northbridge tomorrow at 7 a.m. Cole, you'll report to Jamie Torrent, yes, the one whose innovations you stole. She'll be leading the technical integrity review. This is insane, he muttered. This is accountability. I stood, smoothing my dress. Something this family never taught either of us. Miriam finally spoke, her voice hollow. What about the will? I almost laughed. Keep it. I don't need your money anymore. I bought what actually mattered: the company, the legacy, the truth. I picked up the original envelope, the one that started everything, and placed it in the center of the table like a centerpiece. Grandmother knew you'd try to erase me, so she made sure that erasing me would be the signature on your surrender. The 12:30 mark passed. I canceled the scheduled emails with one tap. Congratulations, I told them. You just saved yourselves from complete destruction. All it cost was the one thing you valued most: control. I walked toward the door, then turned back for one last look. My family sat among the wreckage of their careful plans, surrounded by legal documents and broken pride. The check's on you, I said. After all, I'm not in the will. The champagne flutes on table 12 sat untouched, their bubbles dying like small dreams. Victor stood once more, his voice carrying across the now silent restaurant. As of today, Northbridge Dynamics begins a new chapter under the leadership of Lauren Pierce and Asteric Systems. The words came easier now, resignation smoothing their edges. I will transition to an advisory role, Effective immediately. He looked directly at me, and for one moment, I saw something I'd never seen before: understanding. Not love, not pride, but the raw recognition of being outplayed by someone he'd never considered a player. The documents were signed, witnessed, and notarized. Philippe personally sealed each one with the restaurant's official stamp, adding his signature as witness. The court reporter packed her equipment, handing me a USB drive with the complete recording. "Comprehensive documentation," she said quietly. "Admissible in any court." Cole finally found his voice, though it came out smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Lauren, what happens to me?" I studied my brother, the golden child who'd never had to earn his shine. "You report to Jamie Torrent at 7 a.m. tomorrow. You'll start as a junior developer, same as everyone else. If you can handle 3 months without claiming credit for someone else's work, we'll discuss your future." 3 months. Consider it generous. She wanted to sue you for 2 years of stolen innovations. He swallowed hard, then asked the question that mattered. "Do you need me on the technical team? Actually need me?" It was the first honest thing he'd said all day. "Yes," I said simply. "But this time, you'll earn your place, and the credit will go where it belongs." Miriam stood shakily, those inherited pearls catching the light. She walked toward me, stopping just out of reach, the same distance she'd always maintained. "Your grandmother," she began, then stopped, started again. "She'd be proud." "She knew this would happen," I replied. "Every detail. She even knew you'd wear her pearls today, trying to claim her legacy while denying mine." My mother's hand went to her throat. Without another word, she unclasped the necklace and held it out to me. "These were always meant to be yours," she said. "I didn't take them. Keep them. They're just pearls. I got what actually mattered: the power to decide who sits at the table." The restaurant was beginning to stir again, whispers spreading like wildfire through Harbor Heights elite. By tonight, 3 country clubs would be dissecting every detail. By tomorrow, it would be industry news. Victor signed the last document, the formal transfer of CEO authority. His signature was steadier now, accepting defeat with the same precision he'd once used to build his empire. "The lawyers will file everything within the hour," I informed them. "The press release goes out at 2 p.m. I suggest you prepare your personal statements. Keep them simple. We support this transition and look forward to Northbridge's evolution. Anything else invites questions you don't want to answer." I gathered my papers, my laptop, my phone. The evidence of 3 years' preparation fit neatly into my briefcase, the same one I'd bought with my first paycheck from Arkwell Labs. Cole's question stopped me at the door. "Why didn't you just destroy us completely? You could have taken everything." I turned back one last time. The 3 of them sat among the ruins of their Sunday brunch, looking smaller than I'd ever seen them. "Because River's women don't need scorched earth," I said. "We just need the deed to the land. Besides, grandmother believed in rehabilitation over revenge. Consider this your chance to earn what you always assumed was yours." The glass door of Maison Laurel reflected my exit navy dress pristine, grandmother's earrings catching light, head high. Behind me, the Pierce family sat in their expensive clothes at their expensive table, finally understanding the cost of dismissing the wrong daughter. Outside, Harbor Heights stretched beneath clearing skies. The gray morning had given way to pale sun, burning through clouds like truth through comfortable lies. My phone buzzed with notifications, Sandra confirming the filing, Marcus ready with the story, Dr. Naomi sending a simple, "Brava." But I had one last call to make. I dialed the number for Rutherford and Vale, the law firm that had protected grandmother's secret for 6 months after her death. "It's done," I told the senior partner. "Every condition met, every word they said exactly as she predicted." "She knew them well," he replied, "but she knew you better. There's one more envelope. Ms. Pierce, when you're ready." Another secret, another weapon, but that was for another day. I walked to my car, not the Tesla my parents would have expected, but a practical Honda that had carried me through night classes and early morning coding sessions. The engine started with the same reliable purr that had accompanied every step of my invisible empire. In the rearview mirror, I could see them through the restaurant window, still sitting, still processing, still surrounded by the contracts that had transferred their kingdom to the daughter they'd tried to forget. My phone showed 12:47 p.m. In 13 minutes, the world would know that Rivers was Lauren Pierce, that the overlooked daughter had become the power behind the throne, then taken the throne itself. I thought of grandmother, her hands steady as she taught me to read contracts, to see angles, to plan for contingencies. She'd given me more than money or shares. She'd given me the blueprint for this exact moment. "Rivers women rise," I said to the empty car. Then I drove away from Maison Laurel, away from my family's shock and Harbor Heights whispers, toward the Monday morning when I would walk into Northbridge Dynamics not as the forgotten daughter, but as the woman who'd bought and paid for everything they'd tried to keep from me. The best revenge, it turns out, isn't served cold. It's served at brunch, with proper documentation and multiple witnesses. The Pierce family legacy would continue. It would just have a new author, one who'd learned to write her own story in invisible ink, then reveal it only when the signatures were already dry. Game over. I won. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'm curious. Where are you listening from right now? Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this tale of family revenge and corporate justice resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the channel for more stories like this. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who underestimated you? Share your experiences below.